Okay, so a few weeks ago, I'm at a track day. Nothing crazy, just a local HPDE, coffee in one hand, tire gauge in the other. And this guy pulls into the paddock in what I can only describe as the most boring-looking sedan I have ever seen in my life. Silver, Steelies swapped for stock alloys. Looked like a rental car. And I'm standing there thinking, buddy, you might be a little lost. The grocery store is that way. 40 minutes later, this same boring sedan is out there eating Apexes and walking a guy in a modified Miata. And I remember standing at the fence just going, huh, okay, I see you. That, right there, is the whole idea behind what we're doing today. There's a term for cars like that. We call them sleepers. And if that word's new to you, it's simple. A sleeper is a car that looks completely unremarkable, sometimes even actively boring. But underneath the sheet metal, it's got the guts of something way faster. No wing, no fake vents, no stickers. It just sits there, minding its own business right up until it doesn't. Now, I've been doing this, buying, selling, wrenching on, and yeah, occasionally embarrassing myself in performance cars for right around 20 years now. And if there's one thing the used market has taught me, it's this. Depreciation is your best friend. Luxury cars fall off a cliff in value the second they're not new and shiny anymore. And that means the guts, the chassis, the engine, the actual hardware that makes a car fast, gets sold off for pennies on the dollar to people who don't even know what they're sitting on. So today, I'm handing you 5 of them. Real engine codes, real numbers, real prices you can actually go find this weekend. And this part matters. I'm going to tell you exactly what to check before you trust any of these on track. Because cheap and fast only stays fun if it doesn't also mean cheap and on the back of a flatbed. All right, let's get into it. Real quick, before we get to car number 1, if you're into this kind of thing, digging up the cars everyone else overlooks, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Join the Ride Exposed crew. We spend way too much time finding the stuff dealers would rather you never notice, so you don't have to. Okay, now let's go. First one up is close to my heart, because I actually owned one of these for about 3 years, and it genuinely ruined a couple other cars for me. The E39 generation BMW 540i. Here's the thing about this car, and I need you to really sit with this for a second. It is built on the exact same platform as the E39 M5. Same double wishbone front end, same multi-link rear, same fundamentally brilliant chassis that car enthusiasts still talk about in hushed, reverent tones 20+ years later. BMW didn't dumb down the bones for the 540i. They just put a smaller engine in it and didn't tell anybody. That engine is the M62, a 4.4-liter naturally aspirated V8. And in factory trim, you're looking at around 282 horsepower, 324 pound-feet of torque. Now, I'll be honest with you. By today's standards, that number alone isn't going to scare anybody. But horsepower was never really the point of this car. It's the balance. It's the way BMW's engineers in the 90s were borderline obsessed with getting weight distribution as close to 50-50 as physically possible. Add the sport package, stiffer springs, better dampers, a limited slip diff on a lot of these, and you get a car that turns in like it's got a string tied to the apex, pulling it in. And look, I know what some of you are already typing in the comments. Old BMW, unreliable, sell me a Camry. I get it, the reputation exists for a reason. But most of the horror stories you read online trace right back to somebody who skipped an oil change for 3 years, not some fatal design flaw baked into the M62, especially the later TU revised version. That engine, maintained properly, is honestly pretty tough. Here's the part that actually makes this a legitimate track car though. Because the subframe and suspension geometry is shared with the M5, the aftermarket doesn't really care that you've got a lesser engine. You can bolt M5 sway bars, M5 control arms, even M5 brakes right onto your 540i. I did the sway bar and control arm swap on mine, and the difference honestly felt bigger than most turbo kits I've driven behind. If you're shopping, look at 1998 through 2003 and specifically hunt for the sport package cars. Check the build sheet, Look for the M Sport suspension codes if you're not sure. Right now you can find a clean, well-kept 540i Sport for somewhere between 6 and 10 grand. If you get lucky and find one of the rare 6-speed manual cars, expect 15-ish, but honestly, worth it. One thing before you ever take one of these near a track though, please check the cooling system. E39s have this reputation, a fair one, for plastic cooling components, expansion tanks, sometimes plastic water pump impellers on the earlier cars, that get brittle with age and just let go under sustained heat, which is exactly what a track day throws at a cooling system. Do a full refresh, new pump, thermostat, hoses, expansion tank, before you ever see a checkered flag. Trust me on this one. I learned it the expensive way, on a hot July afternoon, at the worst possible corner of the track. Moving on to a car that surprised me the first time I actually popped the hood and looked closely, because I went in expecting Toyota Camry with a Lexus badge, and I came out realizing I was looking at Supra DNA. The IS300 and its bigger sibling, the GS300, both ran the 2JZ GE. That's the naturally aspirated version of the legendary 2JZ GTE. Yeah, that 2JZ. The one that shows up on Supras putting down 4-figure horsepower numbers at drag strips around the world. In stock IS300 trim, you're only getting about 215 horsepower and 218 pound-foot, which, sure, doesn't sound like a track weapon at first glance. But the chassis underneath was engineered by Lexus with one very specific goal: beat the BMW 3 Series at its own game. Double wishbone up front, multi-link out back, rear-wheel drive, genuinely sorted. And here's the fun fact I love dropping on people at car meets. The 2JZ GE and the 2JZ GTE share the same rock-solid iron block, the same bottom end, basically the same foundation that lets Supra guys run massive turbo setups on totally stock internals. That block is sitting right there in a car most people mistake for their aunt's sedan. Because of that shared architecture, the swap and turbo community around these cars is enormous. Guys have been doing turbo kits and full GTE swaps into IS300 shells for over 20 years now. But even totally stock and naturally aspirated, that iron block just does not quit. 200, 300,000 miles, basic maintenance, and it keeps running like it's got something to prove. If you're buying, target 2001 to 2005 with the 5-speed manual. That's the one enthusiasts actually want, and it holds its value a little better because of it. Automatics run 5 to 8 grand in good shape. Manuals are more like 8 to 13 depending on miles. If you want something a bit bigger and more grand touring, a 1998 to 2000 GS300 gets you the same fantastic engine for 4 to 7 grand. Easy. Before track day though, do yourself a favor and check the timing belt. Yes, belt, not chain, on these earlier engines, and the VVT-I actuator while you're in there. A snapped belt at high RPM on track doesn't just end your session, it ends your engine. If it's been more than 60 to 90,000 miles, or 5+ years since the last one, get it done first. Now this next one, I think, is genuinely criminally underrated, and I say that as someone who used to think AMGs from this era were just expensive ways to lose money. I was wrong. Let's talk about the W210 E55 AMG. From the outside, it's an E-Class. Late 90s, early 2000s. Boxy, conservative. The kind of car a bank manager drives. Subtle badging, no aggressive body kit, nothing shouting for attention. Pop the hood though, and you find one of the more special engines AMG ever put together. Literally put together, by hand, by one technician, whose name is on a little plate riveted right to the valve cover. One man, one engine, start to finish. There's something almost old world about that in an era of robotic assembly lines. That engine is the M1113K, a 5.4-liter naturally aspirated V8, making 391 horsepower and 391 pound-feet. Numbers that were downright shocking for a family sedan when this thing launched. AMG didn't stop at the engine either. Stiffer springs, revised anti-roll bars, quicker steering, bigger brakes pulled from Mercedes' own performance parts bin. Now yes, I'll say the quiet part loud. Mercedes AMGs from this generation have a reputation, and it's not entirely undeserved, for being expensive to keep happy. But here's the truth most people miss. The M113 engine block itself is genuinely one of the toughest V8s Mercedes has ever made. It's the electronics, the sensors, the little ancillary gremlins that tend to cause the headaches, not the bottom end. The parts sharing angle here is real too. The M1113K's architecture and AMG's supercharged tuning philosophy directly carried forward into later AMG models, which means there's actually a deeper and more affordable used parts ecosystem than you'd expect, especially once you find a good independent AMG specialist instead of paying dealer rates. Shop 1999 to 2002. Prices have crept up a bit as people rediscover these. Figure 9 to 14 grand for something with real documented service history. And I'd genuinely rather you buy the higher mileage car with a thick stack of maintenance records than the low mileage mystery car with gaps in the paperwork. Every time. Before you track one, get the engine bay wiring harness looked at. These cars are known for the insulation getting brittle and cracking with age and heat cycling, which causes intermittent electrical faults, the kind that love to show up at the worst possible moment, like mid-session, in the form of a random limp mode. A pre-track inspection of the harness and vacuum lines will save you a very awkward, very slow tow off the circuit. Moving on to a car I genuinely think is one of the smartest track day buys in the entire used luxury world right now, and it's the B5 generation Audi S4. Visually, it's an A4 that hit the gym a little. Some fender flare, twin exhaust tips, subtle badging, that's really it. But under the hood is a genuinely motorsport-flavored formula, a twin-turbo V6 paired with Audi's legendary Quattro all-wheel drive system. The engine is the 2.7-liter bi-turbo 6. You'll see it referred to by its internal codes, AZB, or the earlier APB depending on the model year, putting out 250 horsepower and 258 pound-foot. And because there are two small turbos instead of one big one, that torque comes in early and stays flat across a huge range. What actually makes this thing track-capable, though, is the Quattro system itself, a proper torsion center differential, genuine mechanical torque split between front and rear, not some electronic nanny system pretending to be one. Combine that with a well-sorted independent suspension, and you get a car that just puts power down exiting a corner in a way most rear-drive cars from this era can't touch, especially the moment the pavement gets even a little damp or cold. Now, I know the stereotype, all-wheel drive equals heavy, equals numb, equals boring on a track. And sure, that reputation exists for good reason with some AWD platforms, but Audi tuned this particular system with a rearward torque bias, which gives the B5 S4 a noticeably more playful, more neutral balance than people expect walking up to it. Here's the juicy detail. This bi-turbo 6 shares core architecture, and even some internals, with the engine in the European market RS4 from the same era, a car that never officially made it to the US, which means American S4 owners have real access to genuine RS-level tuning knowledge and hardware. Upgraded turbos, a better intercooler, a tune, and a stock 250 horsepower engine can be pushing 350 to 400, with the internals holding up just fine. Shop 2000 to 2002 with the 6-speed manual. That's the configuration people specifically hunt for. Figure 7 to 12 grand for something clean and well sorted. Just steer clear of anything with unknown timing belt or water pump history. And speaking of which, before track day, the single biggest thing to check is the timing belt and water pump service interval. This is an interference engine, meaning if that belt lets go, it's not a pull over and call a tow truck problem, it's a the engine is now scrap metal problem. The recommended interval on these is shorter than a lot of owners expect, generally somewhere around 60 to 75,000 miles or 5 years. No documented recent service? Budget for it immediately, before you add any track stress into the mix. And for the last one, I saved the wildest backstory for the end. The first generation Cadillac CTS-V. Think about where Cadillac was in the public imagination in the early 2000s. Comfortable, quiet, Kind of a punchline, honestly, in enthusiast circles, the car your grandfather drove to the club, and then, seemingly out of nowhere, Cadillac shows up with a sedan they specifically developed and validated at the Nürburgring, with a genuine Corvette engine under the hood. Nobody saw it coming. Most people walking past one in a parking lot today still have no idea what they're looking at. Early 2004 cars ran the LS6 straight out of the Corvette Z06, 400 horsepower, 395 pound-foot. From 2005 through 2007, they switched to the LS2, still 400 horsepower, but with a broader, more usable torque curve. This is a real small block V8, closely related to engines that were winning races at the time. And Cadillac's engineers didn't half-step it. They set lap-time benchmarks against European rivals at the ring and reportedly refused to sign off on the car until it met them. That's not a marketing story. That's just what happened. Yes, GM interiors and electronics from this era carry a reputation, and I won't pretend that stereotype came from nowhere. But the drivetrain, the LS engine, the 6-speed manual that came standard, is about as tough as American performance engineering gets. LS engines have a well-earned reputation for surviving the kind of abuse that would put other engines in the hospital. And here's the best part for anyone thinking track use. Because this is fundamentally a Corvette engine wearing a sedan's clothes, you get access to the entire LS series aftermarket, which is genuinely one of the biggest, cheapest, most well-understood performance parts ecosystems on the planet. Headers, intakes, tunes, even full-built engine packages, mostly bolt-in and dramatically cheaper than the equivalent European parts. Shop 2006 to 2007 with the LS2. GM ironed out a decent chunk of the early build quality complaints by that point. Figure 9 to 15 grand for a well-kept manual example. Fair warning, prices are climbing on these as more people wake up to what a bargain they've been. So the window on cheap CTS-V is closing, not opening. Before track day, get underneath and check the rear differential mounts and the drive shaft U-joints. High torque, high load track driving is genuinely rough on this drivetrain, and worn diff bushings or drive shaft components are a common failure point on higher mileage cars that haven't been track prepped yet. Alright, so that's the list. Real quick recap, the BMW 540i, basically an M5 wearing a disguise. The Lexus IS300 and GS300, hiding a Supra's heart under a badge nobody respects enough. The Mercedes E55 AMG, a hand-built engine wearing a business suit. The Audi S4, proof that all-wheel drive absolutely belongs on a track. And the Cadillac CTS-V, America's Nürburgring secret with a Corvette's soul. If you put a gun to my head and made me pick just one as the best overall value, I'm going with the Lexus IS300. Bulletproof engine architecture, a chassis Lexus genuinely engineered to hunt BMWs, and you can still find good ones under 8 grand. It's just really hard to beat as a starting point into all of this. But honestly, every single car on this list punches way above its price tag, and the right one for you really comes down to what kind of drive you're chasing. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to subscribe for more automotive secrets. Comment below which of these 5 you'd take to the track this weekend. Alright, see you in the next one.